Thank you for participating in the 10th Annual BlackStar Film Festival. We would like to thank our funders and individual donors, as well as our network of producing and community partners. This panel, Glitch and the Moving Image, is co-presented by Media Justice. The runtime for this program is 60 minutes, including audience Q&A. So please leave your questions in the comments, and we'll do our best to engage with them. Please follow us on all social media platforms at BlackStarFest and use the hashtags BSFF21 and hashtag BlackStar10. Don't forget to fill out our audience evaluation and vote for your favorite films. We hope you have a wonderful time during the 2021 Black Star Film Festival.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Farah. I am the panel producer at BlackStar. Welcome to our 10th annual edition. We are so excited to be experiencing this virtually alongside each of you. And it's really my pleasure to introduce you to the moderator of this panel, our very own Imran Siddiquee, who is the communications director for BlackStar Projects, but they are also a writer and filmmaker challenging systems of domination, which is so relevant to this conversation.
Thanks, Farah. So excited to be here. As mentioned, my name is Imran. I use they, them pronouns. I have the honor to introduce this amazing panel on glitch and the moving image. I'm going to start with Cameron A. Granger, who came up in Cleveland, Ohio. Working primarily in video, Granger deals with the act of looking, what it means to be looked at and to look back. His recent projects include the Get Free Telethon, a 24-hour live stream community fundraiser, Pearl, a body of collaborative works with his mother at Control Shift in Oakland, and A Library for You, a traveling community library most recently housed at Ekata Project Space in Bombay, India. Welcome, Cam. Thank you for being here. Next, I'm going to introduce E. Jane. E. Jane is an interdisciplinary artist and musician based in Brooklyn, New York. Inspired by Black liberation and womanist praxis, their work incorporates digital images, video, text, performance, sculpture, installation, and sound design, exploring safety and futurity, is that right? I think so. As it relates to Black femmes, as well as how Black femmes navigate and negotiate space in popular culture and networked media. Since 2015, Jane has been developing the performance persona Misa, an underground pop star for the cyber resistance. They are currently a Harvard College Fellow in New Media as part of Scratch, 3As. Thank you so much for being here, E. So honored to have you. Next, going to introduce Jazmin Jones, a Brooklyn-based, Bay Area-raised visual storyteller and thought, T-H-O-T, leader with Bufu, By Us, For Us. Her aim is to build platforms for more vibrant and nuanced representation of the marginalized communities she's a part of. Working across visual mediums, her projects often echo personal experiences as a queer Black femme waging intimacy in the post-internet era. Thank you so much for being here, Jazmin. And last but not least, we have Legacy Russell. Legacy is a curator and writer. Born and raised in New York City, she is the incoming executive director and chief curator of The Kitchen. Currently, she is the associate curator of exhibitions at the Studio Museum in Harlem. Russell's academic, curatorial, and creative work focuses on gender, performance, digital selfdom, internet idolatry, and new media ritual. Her first book is Glitch Feminism, a Manifesto, published in 2020. Her second book, Black Meme, is forthcoming via Verso Books. Thank you so much for being here, Legacy. Thank you again to everyone. Can't wait to get into this. I'm going to ask just kind of an introductory question, but feel free to, in your response, add to that introduction or anything else you want to say about yourself. And yeah, I wanted to start, with E's Nope Manifesto. And in my notes, I call it the legendary Nope Manifesto because that's how I feel about it. And E writes about their art in that piece, quote, I am not asking who I am. I'm a Black woman and expansive in my Blackness and my queerness, as Blackness and queerness are always already expansive. None of this is as simple as identity and representation outside of the colonial gaze. I reject the colonial gaze as the primary gaze. I am outside of it in the land of nope. And this manifesto is also referenced in glitch feminism. So I was just interested in starting here and hearing from you all about how these ideas resonate in your own work, your own approach to visual art, film, image making, curating. And yeah, I want to start with legacy, and then we can go around and just kind of respond.
Gosh, I mean, well, first of all, it's such an honor to be here with so many people that I admire. And so thank you for the generous invitation. I will say, like, living in the land of nope is something that I spend a lot of time thinking about, certainly deeply inspired by E's work and practice, and the ways in which, of course, this manifesto really predates the Glitch Feminist Manifesto, right? In terms of like its current form and as it exists in a publication now in the world. So it really was a very important thing to me to have that work included within and as a kind of starting point for glitch feminism as a text, because it does so much to establish the place where the text speaks from, and also too where parts of my practice, and I know the practice of all folks here on the line, really kind of stems from. So I love imagining this idea of being in the land of nope as the site of both kind of epic, utopic possibilities, right? But also to the kind of reality of Blackness and Black femmehood is always living at the end of the world. And that like existing within that space is a site of kind of a regenerative possibility, and as well, kind of this deep precarity that's kind of folded into that. And so what are the ways in which nope can kind of create new topographies and allow us to think through the sort of limits of these different identities, and then to kind of break through those limits and to redefine things altogether.
Thank you. Yeah, we could go next to Cam if you wanted to respond.
Hey y'all. Really hyped to be here with everybody. It's an honor for real. And I mean, I guess to answer the question, I was thinking about how there's this like protest chant. I mean, like that I'm sure y'all have heard. It's like indict, convict, send the killer cops to jail. The whole damn system is guilty as hell. And the first time I heard that was in 2014, marching for Mike Brown, and then later that year when Tamir Rice was killed in Cleveland, I heard it again and again every time another one of our siblings was killed, right? And last summer, I was in the streets again and I heard that same chant, and I was thinking to myself for the first time, I'm like, okay, if the whole system is guilty, why are we still using the tools and like still using the language and the tools of the system to try and like as a call for justice, quote unquote. So, and I guess, like thinking about challenging that like reformist thinking of my own brain, and then thinking about my art in the same way, right? Because, okay, if I say I want this work to exist in a space of like fullness, show all the fullness of the people that I love and care about that are on like in the images that I make, am I really going to be able to achieve that within like the current dominant framework, right? So I guess like, okay, taking this like I try and like make sure that the work is existing the same way that I want my own like life principles to exist in, right? I hope that makes sense. But yeah, I don't know. And that I think that way of thinking also brought me to third cinema practices, which I just recently started to learn about, which is the film movement that started in the 50s and 60s in Latin America and on the mother continent, and was kind of carried forward by filmmakers of the LA Rebellion like Charles Burnett and Stacey Dash. And again, like these filmmakers that realized that for any new perceptions to really be made possible and inevitable, we're going to have to find new modes of making things entirely. We can't just be looking for positive representation inside what's already there. We got to make some new shit. New stuff. Sorry, I don't know if I can cuss. Yeah.
You could say it. It's all good. Yeah, Jazmin, do you want to go next?
All right, so hi. I think it is inevitable that in the course of this panel, I will identify myself as a fangirl for the other panelists. Like, I am such a fan and really excited to be here. And I think, like, both glitch feminism and Nope have provided this kind of language to articulate my own existence. And I think I often like wear the title of curator or archivist because it acknowledges that you're like working with existing materials. And I feel like in like the film world, there's this idea that the director is like, all of the ideas are off the dome and it's coming out of your head. And it's just like, and I have to shout out my collaborator, Olivia Michaela Ross, too, who has reminded me where it's like, God, like so much of what I'm making is just like in reverence and in reference to these people. And it's like, do I need to be a director? Is this just curation? And it's like, no, like this is like part of a radical feminist practice of like just like acknowledging the people who have been involved in the work before. So like I want to thank y'all. And I think like, yeah, so much of the work in like academia and like manifesto space and then also like technology and STEM is like working through like the baggage that has been put onto me around like who is technical, who is academic, who's an authority. And so I think like for me, what's been most important is like the I can relate to these texts. It's speaking my language in a way that is like, oh, I'm allowed to speak on these things too. And it's also nice where it's like, okay, so like, how can I build and like add on to like the baseline and foundations that have been so generously offered by my fellow panelists? So yeah, I think my work is like of all of these things and is very much like functions in the way that the internet functions, where it's just like a bunch of things, and at a certain point it's hard to say like what is the origin of the meme, and like it's like that's I feel like I'm like a 8th generation meme coming from these people's work, and it's just like I'm the meme iteration of these things, but I'm just so glad that there's like these like these texts to point back to and be like, no, this is grounded in real theory. So yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah, and E, I'm curious. I know you wrote that, obviously, but I'm wondering how it resonates with you today. Years later, and with your current work, and then just you can also respond to what others said as well. Oh, I think you might be muted. Yeah.
Oh no, sorry. I was saying I wanted to start first by saying how happy I am to be on this panel of so many amazing, brilliant artists who I really admire and brilliant thinkers. And I'm really grateful for everyone's comments so far. I've been taking notes this whole time. And then to answer your question, Imran, so yeah, I wrote the Note Manifesto when I was in graduate school at the University of Pennsylvania. And it was actually just like a Facebook post update to something that someone had asked me in an interview around work. I was doing this project called Siddiquee, which I won't get into, but around that, they were like, like they basically described it as like my work was dealing with representation and identity. And I was like, no. So then I wrote this Facebook update. And then I was like, this is actually a manifesto for what I'm doing in a lot of ways. And so I put it on my studio wall at grad school to sort of be like, and I blew it up big and was like, when you came in my studio, this is what you have to see first before you see me. So that before we get into it, read this first and then let's talk. You know what I mean? And I think like, when I started like getting exposed to like Fred Moten and like thinking through like things like the undercommons I realized that like the land of Nope is also like a space of the undercommons. Like I was on TikTok the other day, and this kid, they were asking like this guy does this like kids say the darndest things, but like these little like black kids, and they're like, hey, are you smart? Like, yeah, like what country do you live in? And the kid's like, the hood. And I'm like, whoa, you know, like I don't know, like that's the land of Nope for me, is like where that kid lives. You know what I mean? And I understand that philosophy of like I come from Prince George's County, Maryland, which was a predominantly Black space, predominantly Black community. And so I really grew up in this alternative way of thinking about sort of like navigating a colonial gaze. Like it really felt like I was outside of it, and then went to Penn and all these other places and was like, oh, wow, this is a very different experience. But I've realized to make my work, I kind of have to take my eye back to that place, like back to PG. You know what I mean? And like think about like how I operated there and how people are still operating all over the country in order to really make work that speaks to like myself. And I feel like identity representation as phrases are a bit flattening. Like I feel it's an easy way to not deal with specific issues that artists are addressing in their practices. You know, you say identity representation, it's like, okay, that's what it's about. And you can move on, glaze over it, and think about something else in the gallery. And I think we need to really resist that, especially with artists that are trying to, you know, think through what communities need, think through work. Like there's also a part of the manifesto that talks about culture that loves us. And I think my current work, I think through a lot, like, am I making culture that loves the people I come from? And am I making culture that loves people of color? Am I making culture that thinks through us having beautiful futures? Um, so yeah, and just to speak to Legacy's text and just this whole idea of like the glitch, like I love that Legacy's not just talking about the aesthetic, like that's one thing, but there's also like the glitch as a means of like, because sometimes I've been saying for years that sometimes when people are introduced to Black women in certain spaces, they glitch. Like I can feel them glitch because they're not used, especially a Black woman that's showing agency and sort of like control, and autonomy. But yeah, so that's sort of like what I'm thinking through. And I love how Legacy's book speaks to that, and happy to be here.
Thank you. Yeah, so much to talk about. I wanted to quickly mention to the audience, for audience folks, if you have questions, you can drop them in the chat. There's also, we won't have time to look at all the beautiful work that everyone here makes, but in the chat there will be links, and encourage you to check out what we're referencing throughout. But yeah, I wanted to go back to, I think Cam, you said something about how, even when we're trying to embrace this refusal, it might seem that like the tools and technologies of our actual practice of film and video making try to bring us back in line, or it's hard to escape that influence. I know earlier today, Nuatama Badoma was on a panel, and folks were talking about, the colonial camera, or, I think in many of your works, you talk about or deal with anti-Black surveillance and how the ubiquity of that. But as Legacy suggests in Glitch Feminism, thinking of technology and these tools as abstract or as separate, that separation between in real life and online kind of overlooks how, we can't really disconnect those things, and more we understand ourselves and our bodies through these technologies and tools. And so, and in that interconnection, there's that opportunity to, recreate and shape our own bodies too, especially as queer trans folks or people whose bodies are deemed, aberrations. So, just going back to you, Cam, I'm wondering how specifically, how do you deal with that? Like when the tools and technologies are, kind of trying to trap you, but you still want to make this art. How do you approach that?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think, one of the things that I really loved about Legacy's work is how it comes to like the digital or the tech, like the tech we use from like it's interrogating, but it's also, I think it's also really like recognizes the beauty that these things can hold, like, or the avenues for beauty that are in there. And I mean, it makes me think a lot about just how I mean, I think about the UPN, like I think it was like the Thursday night block that used to be on like every week, and it was all these black shows, like 101, Girlfriends, Parkers, like all this like just like that type of stuff that sits with you like forever. And I think about how like I can meet a black person from like anywhere in the country, and we know about this UPN block, and we're able to like there's some avenue of connection there, and I think that's really beautiful. And there I was thinking a lot about like these in like the feudal era, they're the Gothic churches, and they had these like biblical big stained glass paintings or whatever, and people would come in there and like sit with them and look at the images and like kind of instill those like narratives that were in the images, and that became like part of their memory, part of their history, and that's how they like kind of navigated through. And for me, like I feel like blocks like the UPN block were kind of like going to church too in a way, and it's helped me like find pieces of myself in these other people, whether it be the characters on screen or in like my communities around me or people that I don't even really know. But we have some way to connect. And for like people that like haven't always had, real like full control of our imagery in like the mainstream, I think I think those moments are really powerful and really important. Um, And I mean, I guess that's what I think about when I'm making my own images, like where are these things going to be situated at? What are ways that I can like get these out that don't rely on like the most like prominent channels or whatever? Like, can I just like share this? Like, can I put up a monitor in the corner store and just let folks come through and watch it like there? Can we just like gather in the backyard and watch movies with the homies? So I feel like that was all over the place. I hope that makes sense. But yeah, I guess that's what I'm thinking about with that.
I love that. Can I hop in for a second? I guess I want to
Yeah,
like expand on this idea of culture that loves us in relation to what Cam is talking about, because I think in the process of writing and just producing shows, and I know Jazmin will probably have some great things to talk about in terms of as well like producing projects with different intersections, but like I recognize that this idea of kind of standing in the footnote has been something that I've been really deeply invested in and reflecting a lot about, and that for me has meant that like that in the production of all the texts, because I obviously spent a lot of time writing and thinking about things and producing exhibitions, and the production of the text certainly comes down to obviously the material that's standing on the main page, right? But actually this idea of this footnote space as being something where our radical interventions can be possible and where there can be certain types of congregating kind of idolatry, worship, celebration, like that actually is something that is a sort of complex space that historically Black thought sometimes would be relegated within this idea of the footnote, and that actually kind of thinking through the ways in which that space can be a strategic architecture is something that's really exciting for me. So I love this idea, obviously, and like I'm deeply invested in the notion of a culture that loves us as being something that allows for us to kind of stand front and center right on that main stage, but also to kind of call in all the ancestors, all the friends, all the kind of other strands of thought and kind of creative praxis that also holds that up in support, right? And like that actually as a kind of integrated practice too allows for a really necessary glitch and kind of expansion of the ways in which we think about genius and mastery and collaboration, all those kind of complicated art historical tropes that I just think Black work does something different, right? To allow for those things to actually take on a different shape and have that collective work really be deeply embedded in what it is supposed to look like, right? What the outcome is and the ways that those things can be made visible and made loving, right? To the point of a culture that loves us.
Yeah, that's a really great thought. I was wondering if anyone wants to respond to that before I move on. Jazmin or E.
I mean, just I gotta shout out the bars of like, am I making culture that loves us? Like, I think that again, putting language to um, just like an action that I'm already like that resonates. So like, that's wonderful to hear. And yeah, I think I can expand a little bit more on those things. I definitely think of like cultural creation and preservation as a form of care work if handled correctly. And um, two projects come to mind currently. I'm working on a project seeking Mavis Beacon, hybrid documentary. If the name Mavis Beacon rings out to anybody, anywhere, like I want to hear from you. I'm trying to find the Haitian woman who modeled for this software, who I believe is the biggest Black woman in technology. And she hasn't, no one knows where she's been for the past 26 years. So that is something that I do see as a wellness check. We'll see if she agrees with me when I find her. But also, and then, yeah, kind of what Cameron was bringing up reminded me too, or the question to Cameron around like, how do you navigate these things? Yeah, there's a project that's dormant for me right now, the All Black ASMR account. But like a year ago, y'all were on the internet. It was like, it was intense. There's black squares, there's mutual aid. There was just like, and I was also just on my phone constantly. Like the screen time was through the roof. And so I have this All Black ASMR account that I said, yeah, it's dormant. Check it out. There's a lot of content there. I might hop back in when I feel like procrastinating. But that was really interesting because the whole idea was to just curate a space for Black ASMR content, because I realized like most of the accounts on Instagram that are for ASMR are not showing Black people at all. And I'm not necessarily someone who gets off on ASMR, but I just get off on like healing imagery. And so that was really interesting because I actually learned like in terms of like how it physically impacts us. Like I feel like one, I did kind of troll and glitch the definition of ASMR. So there is just like, I think Black people use humor or like as a form of ASMR, and that's debatable. But beyond that too, like it rewired me, and like I was dreaming differently, and I was like I was looking at the world differently, and like these like tactile experiences I was having, I'm like, ooh, let me like be present in this, let me document this, let me share this. And so I think it's interesting how like the work and the projects that we dedicate our time to also shape us throughout that course. And now that my attention is more like I'm an e-girl investigator trying to find a missing Black woman, like my dreams are different and my dreams are like intense. And so I just, yeah, I think it's really interesting just to hear again. I'm gonna shout that phrase out again. Am I making culture that loves us? And so with this current project where I'm talking about things like the violence against Black women, the erasure of our contributions in this field, these are like really sobering topics that aren't always like amusing and actually like can be incredibly triggering even to my target audience to engage with. So I think figuring out how to address that like these things exist and we don't exist in a bubble, but also like how can we navigate that with care. And again, that's why I'm so hyped to be on this panel, because I got some folks to look to in that regard.
Yeah, thank you. Just a little bit, just pivoting off of that, but I wanted to ask you about within this idea of like how you can shape and name yourself through the tools of the colonial tools of filmmaking and these technologies. And I'm thinking about your project, Misa, and some of your other work too. I was wondering if you could say a bit more about how that project kind of like might relate to this idea of like rejecting the gaze, but then also maybe naming yourself and creating a new idea of yourself. Oh, I think you're.
I love
There you
being
go.
muted. I'm so sorry. Yeah, I mean, thinking through sort of how to create inside of these, like inside with these tools, but not necessarily worried about the gaze primarily. Like for me, that really started with me being in grad school and taking video seminar, like thinking like, I want to be like oh God, I'm not going to think of his name right now. He did Deadpan, but he also did 12 Years a Slave. Steve McQueen. Thinking, I want to be Steve McQueen coming into school and being like, I'm going to make serious video art, y'all. And then looking at serious video art and being like, I don't care about this that much. And sort of thinking, I actually care much more about music videos and like commercials, because I grew up looking at those all the time. They're ubiquitous. You know what I mean? When the TV's just kind of like on, and like MTV and like BET and like sort of like all these channels that like VH1 Soul, like that was kind of like my lexicon, not necessarily like German video art. So I was like, I'm gonna imitate these forms instead. And that sort of led me to working with these like reperformance videos that I was doing around music videos from the 90s, which kind of like led into the Misa persona in some ways, where it was sort of like, I want a persona that does these things. Also, at the same time, my friends are throwing a party, and one of my friends decided to go on residency while throwing this party. It was like, hey, I need somebody to perform. Can it be you? I was like, sure, I'll make up this name. And then sort of thinking about like, I don't know, it was 2015, you know what I mean? Sorry, didn't mean to rhyme there, but there was a certain type of energy that summer where like things were on fire, and you know, Sandra Bland was murdered, and I needed a hero and I did not have one. And so I thought, I'm going to create this figure that can be a hero for me, that exists in this like club space, but also can sort of like stand in front for me, I guess, in sort of like these reperformance videos. And then sort of I was setting under David Hart, and he was like, you need to take these videos like a little bit more seriously. You're winking a little bit in these reperformances, and I need to feel realness from you. And I think that's where the persona really got really serious to me, because I was like, I'm playing with this whole project. Like, okay, I need to be more serious about these reperformances. Like lip syncing is a whole thing people do well. But then also like, I know I sang when I was a kid. I know I performed when I was a kid. Why am I playing? Why am I not on stage? Why am I not really going there? If I think this is so fascinating, like why am I sitting in this ivory tower studying these things from afar? Like I'm distant from them. And Misa really was born out of me wanting to get closer. Yeah. I
Cool.
hope, does that answer your question?
Totally. Yeah. Thank you. And yeah, you know, another thing I wanted to ask, another project for Jazmin, you know, in your collaborative project Bufu, by us for us, I watched in one of the promo videos, you talk about how, you know, when organizing in communities of color, if it's successful, you know, you're going to bring attention from these extractive white institutions who ultimately, you know, the violent gaze that you're rejecting, it's kind of it's just there. But you go on to say in that video, you know, it's not necessarily about making spaces completely safe, but just striving to make them safer. And I wanted to just kind of get into like the space of like TikTok and online video creation, because I think a lot about how, you know, primarily Black artists are creating these viral, impactful works and then having them be stolen as soon as they become popular, but simultaneously are facing like material like threats to their livelihood from sometimes from the platforms themselves, like on TikTok for, you know, sex workers, trans folks, but and just you know, Black people in general having to see death recycled over and over again. But yeah, so I was just curious, like from your perspective, you know, and really thinking about that community project, you know, how do we make these spaces actually safer online for Black artists and filmmakers who need it to share their work?
Thank you for that question. There's so much to say. I think, firstly, what I'll name, I think I just get really caught up like anytime there's a new social media thing. So I actually like, I'm a very late adapter. I have a TikTok account. I have not really used it. And I have to shout out my collaborators in Bufu, like Siddiquee and Catherine. They are on TikTok with the aunties. And also shout out my collaborator, Sonia. I think that in my collective work, they have like, yeah, my peers have really pulled me forward and been like, we can shape the space to be whatever we want. And that's been true online, and that's also been true in institutional settings where it's like, oh, they got resources or there's tools there, like there's a way that we can finesse and troll, and like these are people who taught me to like really see words like finesse and troll as terms of endearment. So shouts out to them, I think. But also something that's worth naming too is like, we're a collective that does, like we do in-person events with our intimate community members. And now we're in an interesting predicament where there's like our social media platform, like there's 15,000 followers on Instagram and we don't have 15,000 community members. And like the way we're structured, it's hard for all of those like new people engaging to be aware that like this is just for folks and like really it's like for friends who are just trying to figure out how to like survive and thrive. And so we've been talking about possibility around like stepping away from online or maybe deactivating and like what if we just go off the grid, or there's been discussion around like what if we continue doing the same work but our logo isn't on it and like it's self-selecting, and if you come that's because you wanted to come to the workshop, not because you wanted to come to like some millennial hype collective shit, frankly. So I think it's really about just like moving with what feels good, and also like with these spaces like the TikToks, I have so much I'm just trying to keep up with like the Black internet, because it's like Black folks will determine what happens in any space, and it's like even if the algorithms are like violent towards us, it's like then we troll that shit. So like I have a lot of faith, and like this came up in another discussion recently too, but like just watching like the TikTok strike is just like what a beautiful use of humor to make a point. And like when you see those dry videos of like, white people who don't know what to do to make the Stallion song that is literally telling them what to do, I think like the point proves itself, and it's done so excellently with humor. So like I have so much faith that like Black folks will continue to like take things and make them amazing, and then like find something else before everybody else like ruins it. And like I think we can look to like Vine too. Like when we think about Vine, like that whole platform and it's like how we remember it is like it's defined by Blackness. Like it cannot be separated from like Black folks made it lit, and that like had an influence on how like TikTok and Snapchat and all of these other things evolved. So it's like I trust that like as a community too, Black folks, we've been through some things. So it's like if it's like just like dealing with like a platform that isn't designed to support us, it's like people gonna find us anyway. We're gonna find each other. Also because we got the hottest takes. So yeah. And I also think like it's yeah. Jury's out. I want to exist online, and it is like such an intensely violent place, but that's like true of the whole world, right? So it's like I want to exist in the world, but it's violent. So it's like I guess I got to figure out how to make that feel okay for me and my people. And yeah, again, shouts out to my collaborators who keep being like, "Hey, TikTok's okay. Like, come over here. Like, it's kind of cute." And I've heard like the moment that you start seeing content from one platform on another one, like now my Instagram is just people pulling from TikTok, where it's like, okay, I'm behind, like I should get there. So but it is that fear of like, is this safe for me? Am I gonna see like some E-Bombs World dead body stuff, or like like I don't know how this algorithm is gonna respond to me. So there's that too.
I would love to pick it back a little bit.
Please go on. I'm just gonna say like nothing is safe, but that doesn't mean that life isn't worth living.
I was just going to say that my therapist actually recommended for me to start being on TikTok, like to watch TikToks. She was like, get off. My Black woman therapist was like, get off Instagram and get on TikTok. And I listened. I just lurk. You know what I mean? And the algorithm does learn you.
I lurk on
fairly
TikTok
well.
too, for sure.
Right? And sometimes people try you, but
I'm really curious about, because the algorithm seems like TikTok, partially because the algorithm wasn't created in America, and then also just because it's like so on point. Like it's like I want to know. Like there was a meme I almost shared in response to this panel, but where it's just like, yeah, like I hate the algorithm. Thanks for ruining my life. And then it's like the algorithm is like, I'm literally just a reflection of you and the things that keep your energy. And like I am a tool. So like if you don't like what you're getting fed, then that's you, boo boo.
Okay, so that's the thing about the TikTok algorithm intensely. Like definitely people told me, make sure you like what you want to see, because that's what it's going to give you. Like Jazmin, 100%. And that's true with technology in general. It's a reflection of humans anyway,
Okay, thank you for that. Hearing that a therapist has recommended TikTok over Instagram is like the final push to get me there.
That's the endorsement. It's the one we all needed.
I was looking, and there was like it doesn't know me yet, so it assumed that the kind of thing I would be into is like 911 or 911 calls, and it's like, this is not, like, I do not want to hear from a guy who just murdered his wife. And so I was just like, what is TikTok? But I haven't trained her yet, so I'm gonna work with the algorithm and kind of treat it like maybe a pet that I can come to love and who can like surprise me.
I'm so sorry you dealt with that. Also, one small point about stealing on TikTok, or not stealing, but sharing, and like Black content creators not really getting credit. I watched a video today that was very good, but I could not share on Instagram. Like it was not, you were not allowed to share it. And I thought that was very interesting. And I thought, you know what, good for you. It is your video. I shouldn't be able to share it. Like, I always credit people, but still, good for you, So I think people are doing stuff like that also, kind of protect their content.
Yeah, and Legacy, I wanted to ask if you wanted to respond as well, because I know your new book, at least from the title, Black Meme, it seems related, but yeah, I'm curious to hear what you're working on there.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm writing it actively, but I will say that what's interesting about it is that it's kind of like an amalgam of many years of research, lots of different folders with crazy things in them, all the things that you kind of are mining from the internet and thinking about in terms of this question of the archive. But as people have asked questions about this work and research, often they're asking because of the title about Black memes as they exist within the state that we know them now. And really, the book does not spend time talking about that because it actually looks from 1900 to present day and asks us to kind of think about the construct of memes and the idea of what it is to be viral as actually being something that is more expansive beyond the limitations of how we understand cyberspace right here and now. And that the thing that's really remarkable about Black culture is that Black culture has kind of, for now hundreds of years created this possibility of virality, and that actually is something that is both devastating but also really incredible. And across kind of study of 1900 to present day, there are so many amazing and challenging touch points about what that looks like, how that has manifested, and quite literally the ways in which Black virality and kind of mimetic Blackness has advanced technology, literally. Thinking, for example, about Michael Jackson's Thriller as a music video. When that kind of came into the world, it was more popular than the song on its own, right? So the visuals did something that was very specific to the point of what folks were saying earlier about just having the TV on, right? What it meant to have that exist. And also selling VHS tapes became popular because of this music video. And this is something I think that's really incredible when we think about what that means, because what it means is that a Black person created this material of culture, right? And as a contribution to what that has looked like, which of course in its own right has been, kind of virally memed in its own fashion a million times over. But that literally it changed the ways in which people were using these technologies in their homes. And that to be able to think about this question of access, right? To be able to think about the rise of the VHS tape and home video because of what that was as a phenomenon. These are things that I think are really important to try to talk about alongside of our current conversation of kind of thinking about TikTok and the things that you see on Instagram and these other platforms. So, I'm really excited to think about these things, but also it's a kind of devastating book to be writing. So I've been writing it in small pieces, which is very different, I would say, than some of the other things that I work on, because when you're sitting down and looking at this history, you're looking at everything from looking at the coverage of Emmett Till to talking about the ways in which the March on Selma shaped the ways that people were engaging with media on TV, and you're looking at postcards that were circulated of state terrorism. You're looking at the ways in which too that the beating of Rodney King at the hands of the LAPD was a whole moment in terms of this kind of breaking open and redefinition of what viral could even be, and literally is known as the kind of the first viral video. So thinking of these genesis points across history, there are things within that are deeply uneasy, and I think people don't want to talk about those things when they talk about this idea of mimetic Blackness and sharing material as it exists on the internet. They want these things to be maybe more simple and less complicated and compromised. But I think that the goal of the text itself is to complicate it and to make it more difficult for people to actually pretend that these different sites are neutral.
Well, yeah, it sounds like a lot, and good luck writing the book, but I'm very excited to read that. Wanted to pause and give anyone a chance to respond to that, if anyone would like to before I move on. It's okay if not.
I'm
Yeah.
curious, I guess, as you mentioned, like this project being different and that it's intense and like how it takes an emotional toll, what the in between then looks like, or how you're caring for yourself in that process, or like, yeah, what do you like empty headed like vibe out to when you're like not looking at like really intensely triggering histories around things that you care about?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think like parts of these things are actually they're both triggering, but also they're like really important to like slow down and spend time with. And so I found that it's like an interesting thing because in the periods in between, I've been doing like lots of other types of reading. Like I just finished Caleb Azuma Nelson's book, Open Water, which I really recommend to folks who are looking for a read this summer. It's a super important book. Um, yeah, for a variety of reasons. And I really have enjoyed it. But I like, thinking about the ways in which kind of taking breaks has been dipping in and out of other types of material culturally and otherwise. But, also too, I think, it has been good to be reminded of the ways in which culture loops in on itself, right? That like all of the ongoing discussions about sort of precarity around voting and voter registration right now in the United States arcs right back to that period of time in terms of the March on Selma, that the possibilities of that and the ways in which that has contributed to our current understanding of viral culture and as it exists within an arc of new media is really actually an important thing that I think that we don't always spend time with, given the speed and frequency within which much of this is being produced and shared and reported on online. And so making some of those connections also too, like even though we know that they're standing kind of in plain sight, but being able to slow down and spend time with them and reflect about the ways in which these conversations actually obviously are not new, that they're deeply instrumental to the shaping of our history, has been encouraging, if for no other reason than to just best understand that there are long arcs in the possibilities of change and revolution. And so, in this moment where there have been these ongoing discussions that, at points I think have knocked the air out of all of us, right? I've found that to be actually a really amazing thing to be able to sit with, right? Like, and to think through that, the pacing of kind of the way in which I exist on the internet, right, is something that can move at a certain frequency and speed, but actually as I step away from it and kind of immerse myself more fully in this research, that I can slow down and kind of like really go deep and long into a single event, right? And have that be viewed in the round in a way that like allows me to arrive at new conclusions. And so that's been, I think, an important thing because, the ways too that we obviously are consuming and engaging with information encourages us to kind of always accelerate. And so the lesson, I think, of working on a project like this has been, certainly to think about ways to refuse that as a paradigm.
Awesome. And real quick, just if there are any questions in the audience, please drop them in the chat. I know we only have a few more minutes, but would love to get some audience questions. But just to pick up on kind of some of what you're saying, Legacy, it was kind of making me think about how, in many of y'all's work, you're dealing with time and how, the past is not really the past. In Seeking Mavis Beacon, you're doing that, Jazmin, and in your project, Cam, the Line, you're doing that as well. And I'm curious if we could keep talking about this space or the subject of space and time, and how in your way how you use it to refuse and to embrace glitches.
You want me to? Should I
Yeah,
talk?
sorry.
Right.
My bad.
Oh no, you're good. No. Yeah, I mean, so I've been really trying to kind of what's the word I'm looking for? Maybe like divest myself from the idea of like story as a kind of like individual hereditary thing that's like kind of exists as in like a separate space and like a separate like space and time, right? And I think that's one of the things I really love about Jazmin's Mavis Beacon project, because it is like asking for all these different people's, all these different voices, all these different stories. I think that's really beautiful because I feel like that's how a story should be, right? But uh and so if you look at a piece I did like The Line, which is a story about the Near East Side of Columbus, Ohio, right? Where I spent a lot of my time at when I first moved to the city, like almost 10 years ago. Um, and that is it's a historically Black neighborhood. It used to be called the Blackberry Patch, Poindexter Village. And it was sort of severed from the rest of the city when highways started to be developed, cutting it off from, you know, money, food, really like the things that a neighborhood needs to like serve to thrive, right? But the neighborhood's still there, and people are still there. Um, there's still things happening there, obviously, like, you know, we survive. But when I was setting out to make this project, one thing I was trying to be very intentional about was like making sure that it's not from just one perspective, right? Because it's not, it should be, you know, it should be a tapestry of things, all these different voices, ideas, you know, narratives, whatever. And I mean, I guess that's what I'm trying, like, what is it, I feel like, you know, cameras love like draw these like dividing lines between space and time, right? Naturally, like that's what the shutter does, right? Um, it separates like me and the people that I'm capturing. It separates, you know, the before and the after, all that stuff, right? And so I want to do with my practice, try and mend those divides, the like stitch, the legacy talks about that in the book too, right? Um, yeah, I think it should all come back to the us and not just the me. Um, that's what all the artists that I love do, right? And I want to continue that. Um, yeah, yeah.
Thank you. And yeah, we have a few more minutes, and I don't know if there are any questions, but um, also in one of the works that you shared with the panelists ahead of this was this really great. I think it's "Let Me Be a Woman" TM or trademark. I don't know if that's if I'm saying it correctly, but also in that project, you're also dealing a bit with this concept of cross time. You know, various Black women dealing with similar things, and I'm not doing a great job explaining it, but I would love to hear more from you and how, you know, the genesis of that project and yeah, what where it kind of comes from.
Sure. Yeah, I started that project the first month of my residency at the Studio Museum in 2019. I did the residency 2019, 2020. And that month, Diane Carroll died. And I remember the first clip is actually something that the New York Times used in her obituary. That, funny enough, I read the New York Times article but didn't look at the clip there, but saw it on Twitter. Like literally, like later that day in my studio, was like, I have to use this for something. I think at the time, you know, I had just come back from like touring for Misa, and I was thinking a lot about sort of like who gets to perform femininity and like how femininity is perceived, and also just dealing with like family at home and like how people prepare to be feminine for a family event. You know what I mean? And like high heels that hurt your feet and how everyone has to wear them to prove a point, which I understand and I actually have no judgment of. I'm ambivalent towards it in a judgment sense, but understanding that it's just a necessity and like, why are people doing this? You know what I mean? What is the survival mechanism that people are working with when they do these certain performances of high femininity? And watching Diane Carroll like hit every mark in this video where she gives this acceptance speech for winning a Tony. And I think the important part about that was that she wasn't, in the New York Times obituary kind of covers that she had this role on television that where she was the leading woman, and then couldn't get roles like that on Broadway, even though she was a singer, like triple threat, like, singer, actor. I think she could even dance a little bit. She did cabaret things. So like she's perfect to be the leading lady, but not getting the leading role. And then finally this white man writes a leading role for her, right? And she's like in this video thanking him, thanking everyone for getting this award, and just being like talking about how long it took her to get the award and how much she wanted it. And like when you watch her expressions, her movements, she's giving you Audrey Hepburn. You know what I mean? And I was so struck by that. I was very obsessed with Audrey Hepburn when I was younger, and her performance of traditional femininity, and this like the classic 1950s, 1960s beauty, right? And sort of like watching Diane Carroll embody that, but never before thinking of Diane Carroll as this, sort of like set me on this path. And so it started with her. And then I was thinking about sort of like this Viola Davis video that I had seen years before and had used in the Moot series, actually, that I also shared. Like there's a little sample of Viola Davis when she won the award for How to Get Away with Murder. Is that an Emmy? Emmy? Yes, I think that's an Emmy. So she was like winning the Emmy, and she was sort of like, gave this crazy speech where she starts off quoting Harriet Tubman. And I was like, this speech is really wild. And Harriet Tubman's like talking about wanting to be like, literally talks about like seeing a field with white women with their arms stretched out, beautiful white women, she calls them. And it was just something about hearing that and like, being in like a very white space, but feeling hyper visible. I was just so exhausted. My friend Taja, aka Lorraine, just put out an album called Fatigue, and I was so fatigued. Actually, like I think that word is so perfect. And so like I made this video sort of like sampling that, but then used the longer speech in this publication with the video. And so thinking through that speech again sort of made me think of adding Viola Davis, and then everyone else kind of fell and paced through that. Like I had also been studying Summer Walker and sort of like how she had been dealing with rising to visibility, from like being like an underground sensation and doing these mixtapes to like her first album coming out on like a major sort of like major label subset, and her like anxiety, and then like people like criticizing her and her like kind of going to be herself, and this whole thing where like black people were like, oh, I love her music, but she doesn't wash, because apparently she said something about preferring to take baths over showers, but everyone cuts the clip. And so it was just all these little moments where I was like, these women are trying to rub up against, like, she's like, Summer Walker has literally said, like, I can't be a bad bitch. It's too much work. You know what I mean? And like that feeling of like, rubbing up against the bad bitch stereotype, rubbing up against the leading woman stereotype, and what that means for your finances and your security and your safety. And like, all of that sort of, I don't know, it's just been swimming in my mind for years and through my research. And finally I decided to make a video essay, trying to get a video art, which I found some video art I like now. So I'm like, okay, I have some video art I like, like Black Audio Film Collective stuff. Like, I saw Daughters of the Dust. I'm like, okay, like not that that's video art, but there's something of video art in that. I don't know, but just certain things where I'm like, okay, like I feel like I can use this medium to kind of like speak these opinions, and that work kind of like came out. Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's great. And I know we're unfortunately running out of time. But to close us out, there's this question, and we can just go around to everyone and share. But the question is, what have you found lately that excites you? What recent find has made you geek out? So, we could talk about some more memes or TikTok videos, but we'll start with Jazmin and just go around.
Okay, I'll be quick. I'm doing a lot of research for this May This Beacon project, thinking about who I'm going to interview, and it's either like I'm looking to interview Black cultural icons who made history, or Black folks who were forgotten by history and absolutely should have. And an Instagram account that I like to follow just for shits and giggles, but also has been informative and is like got some millions of followers. Probably everyone knows is Embracing Black Culture. But something that I learned that was relevant to my research is they had shared a clip of, because the Olympics are all the talk right now, an Olympic skater, a Black Olympic skater who had done this like impossible flip that she was that had never been done before by a woman and never been done by anybody, and landed on one leg, and that excited me. And of course, she didn't get points for it, and I think still placed 6th. And I don't remember her name right now, which is atrocious. But yeah, I've been
Or
enjoying.
are you talking about this year? Sorry.
This looks like this was a while ago, so not this year.
So it could be Soraya Bonley. I think that's who you
I think so. So yeah, I've just been enjoying kind of like combing through Black history, but specifically looking for folks that I should have known about. And then like on a tactile thing of just like what anybody listening can take away is like embracing Black culture. It can be a pretty delightful space. And especially if you're someone like me who's not OD on Twitter, it does a nice job of synthesizing Black Twitter. I'm looking for the equivalent of that, but for TikTok. So send me leads. Thank you.
Legacy, anything you want to share?
In terms of things that are inspiring, I mean, I don't know. I've been doing like I said, lots of different types of reading. I've been, as well, like trying to take moments where after like deep saturation online and, in many different forums and channels of digital programming, to be kind of in the world in a different way. So, certainly I think I've been thinking deeply about this is maybe less dazzling or glittery, but just like being quiet. That's something that I've been spending a lot of time working on. And that means that, I'm not having as many plans. I'm trying not to speak out loud as much because, I think that there's something that's really powerful about, the ways in which you can make time and space for yourself to focus on a certain type of interiority, and that those things I think are deeply valuable investments. So it's less maybe of a specific cultural text or citation, but more about the individual work of kind of taking that type of care.
Right. Thank you. Cam, anything you want to share that excites you right now?
Yeah. I just want to say I love being quiet. Being quiet that's one of my favorite things to do. Like being quiet and minding my business are like top 3 things ever. Top 2. But something that's been exciting. I learned how to ride a bike like 2 months ago. So I've been like going on bike rides every day, and that's been inspiring me. It feels like, I don't know, I feel so free on the bike, and yeah, I don't know, that's like really been exciting. I just discovered Celia Cruz's music, and like I've been listening to her like for the past like 2 days straight. Embarrassingly so, I just discovered, but it's been great. Yeah, I guess that's what's exciting me right now.
All right, and E, do you want to close this out?
Sure. Yeah. 2 things, both film related. One, I was Monday years old when I realized that when Getche Mutu did video work and like video art and has a video with Santigold, which blew my mind that one of my students showed me in class. So that's really exciting me. And then also this really dumb show on Netflix that a lot of people love, including Stephen King, called Manifest. Watch it. It's weird. If you like sci-fi, just saying.
All right, I'll check it out. Thank you once again to everyone for making the time to be on this panel. This was so cool. I'm excited to watch this back. It's going to be on our Facebook page. Yeah, I just really appreciate getting to hear from all of you. Such an honor. And yeah, thanks to everyone who watched. And yeah, have a great day.